Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving straight into the blistering, smoke-choked existence of a man who quite literally hammered the medieval world into shape, the blacksmith. Movies love to show them in slow motion, iron glowing like molten sunset, sparks drifting around like fireflies. But trust me, real medieval smithing wasn't a heroic montage. It was filthy, back-breaking, skin-peeling labor. And most of the time, it was downright miserable. So before you settle in, give the video a like and subscribe, but only if you honestly enjoy this kind of content. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing our little nighttime community from around the globe. Now dim your room, maybe switch on a fan for that soothing hum, and let's slip into tonight's tale. You arrive in the world as part of an ancient, soot-smeared dynasty of smiths. No royal blood, no fancy estates, no titles to brag about. Just a family forge, calloused hands, and the permanent smell of scorched iron woven into your childhood. The moment you can walk without tumbling into the coals, you're put to work. By 6 years old, you're officially your father's apprentice, a medieval term that really just means a tiny, unpaid laborer with soot stripes and no legal rights. Your toys are iron tongs. Your playground is a dirt floor beside a furnace hot enough to char your soul. While other kids toss stones or chase chickens, you're mastering the skill of not dying beside molten metal. Your games have fun names like Guess the Temperature with Your Palm, Hammer Until Your Arms Go Numb, and Try Not to Cry When You Ruin Another Nail. Your father, the master smith, is an intimidating wall of muscle who communicates mostly through groans, heavy breaths, and the eternal command, harder. His hands feel like knotted roots, and his expression hasn't changed since the last king raised taxes. He teaches you everything: how to bend iron, how to stoke the fire, how to keep quiet when some armored noble complains about his sword. You don't ask questions. You watch. You imitate. You endure. Mostly because asking anything earns you a flying horseshoe and several days of cold silence. Holidays? Cute idea. Not for you. The forge never rests, which means neither do you. Someone always needs a plow repaired, a blade sharpened, or a horseshoe remade. You soon discover that free time is just the brief moment between one chore and the next. And even though you're supposedly learning a trade, what you're truly mastering is pain endurance, heat survival, and the ability to nap while still on your feet. By the time you hit age 10, you already reek of metal, cursed like you've worked a decade in the docks, and can haul water buckets heavier than your missing dog, who, by the way, probably fled the constant clanging years ago. This is your destiny now. Congratulations. Hope you're fond of endless sweat, rolling smoke clouds, and a lifetime of spinal regret. If you imagined getting a few carefree childhood years before the hammer claimed your soul, think again. Being a kid in a blacksmith's household is more theoretical than real. The moment you can lift something without toppling like a drunk goose, you're officially recruited. Forget toys, forget fun. Your play space is a dim shed filled with hot metal, sharp edges, and fire hazards that would make modern safety inspectors faint. Your version of a playground slide is a row of long tongs leaning beside a bed of burning coal. One misstep, and you earn a surprise lesson in how long flesh can cook before your father casually says, "Why are you screaming?" Your title may say apprentice, but the job description translates to do the chores everyone hates and get scolded anyway. You pump the bellows till your arms vibrate, feed the fire like it's a greedy beast, sweep ash piles, clean filthy tools, stack coal, unstack coal, restack coal, and try your best to dodge falling iron missiles. And yes, all this happens before you've even had your morning bread. Your payment? A bowl of food, a stiff nod, and, on a good day, a half-grunt of approval. In blacksmith dialect, that means you didn't ruin absolutely everything today. Meanwhile, the village kids you once played with are out wandering the fields, tossing sticks, or learning goat milking from their parents. You look at them with a jealousy hotter than your forge. Sure, they smell like barn animals, but at least they're not dodging glowing metal projectiles before sunrise. They might become shepherds or simple farmers. Basic jobs? Yes, but at least they involve fewer unexpected burns and fewer weapons aimed at your foot. Your grand craft so far? Nails. Endless nails. Bent nails, crooked nails, nails straightened and reheated until they're acceptable enough to hold together some noble's rickety chicken coop. If you're fortunate, your father hands you a hammer and lets you strike something on your own, right after he explains, in exquisite detail, every mistake you've made up to this moment. And don't even consider saying, "I'm tired." That phrase does not exist here. Exhaustion is irrelevant. Burnout, that's something candles deal with, not you. You keep hammering, keep dripping sweat, keep pretending you're fine, or at least avoid crying in front of anyone. Because to your master, who also happens to be your father, you stopped being a child years ago. You're not a kid. You're a future blacksmith, forged by fire whether you like it or not. And the training? It never actually stops. The forge isn't just where you labor, it becomes your entire reality. It fills your lungs, coats your skin, reshapes your muscles, and rewires the way you think. By the time you hit your teenage years, the forge doesn't feel like a room anymore. It feels alive. A fiery, smoky, unpredictable monster that you serve, calm, and fear all at once. You recognize every sound it makes. The bellows groaning like an old man, the iron screaming when it meets the water, the hammer striking metal with a deep, bone-rattling chime. There's a rhythm to the chaos, a harsh medieval orchestra, and your body moves to its beat whether you're fully awake or drifting in a sleep-deprived haze. Eventually, the heat stops feeling like heat, not because it's kinder, but because your brain just gives up protesting. It becomes another fact of life, like rain or aging or never-ending taxes. You learn which stones scorch you the fastest, which coals burn the longest, and which innocent-looking patches of floor will absolutely try to melt your feet. Your skin turns dark, but not from sunlight. Your clothes, those same smoke-choked tunics and stiff leather aprons, carry a permanent cologne of burnt wool, metal shavings, and quiet defeat. You don't own much, but the forge claims you completely. Not legally. You're still just the son in your father's workshop, but spiritually, you're the property of the flames. Silence becomes a foreign concept. The hiss, the clang, the crackle, they're always there, gnawing at your ears. When the forge finally goes still, the quiet feels wrong, eerie. Your muscles twitch like you've missed a note in a song you've been forced to repeat since you were small. Your friends, if any stuck around, rarely catch sight of you. Ease at the forge becomes your entire identity. You're no longer just learning to be a blacksmith. You are the forge, a walking limb of heat, iron, and exhaustion. And oddly enough, some part of you starts to care for it. Not the painful parts, the blisters, the burns, the endless sweat, but the tiny flashes of triumph. The perfect curve of a horseshoe, the gleam of a sharpened blade, the moment when glowing metal finally yields to your hammer and takes shape. For a heartbeat, you're not just a soot-covered kid working himself to death. You're a maker, a builder, a vital cog in the medieval world. Then the next order comes in. The fire growls back to life, and you're dragged right back into the grind. By the time your childhood companions are awkwardly growing into their teenage bodies, yours already feels like it survived a siege. While they stretch and strengthen, you stiffen and bend. Your arms are thick, but not in a glamorous knight wielding a sword way. More like a teenager who's been repeatedly mugged by anvils. Your spine? A sad poem, curved from years of hauling iron and folding yourself over a roaring furnace every single day. Your knees complain loudly every time you bend, like old floorboards in a haunted house. Your shoulders snap and click every time you raise the hammer, which, by the way, is basically the rhythm section of your life's soundtrack. And your hands. Oh, your hands. Once upon a time, you had normal fingers. Soft fingers. Human fingers. Now, you're sporting metal-kissed talons. They're split, blistered, scraped, and stained so deeply with ash that not even an army of rivers could scrub them clean. Cuts. Constant. Burns. As regular as meals. Your fingernails? Half of them are charcoal-colored and the rest are either cracked or long gone. Someone hands you a loaf of bread, and you hold it like it's an explosive hedgehog made of needles and disappointment. because every joint already feels hexed. And downtime? Recovery? That's a fairy tale for other people. Strain a muscle? Keep going. Mess up your wrist? Swap hands. The forge doesn't pause out of sympathy. Iron is not going to chill politely while you stretch. And then sleep. Oh, sleep. You'd assume after a day of pounding hot metal you'd collapse instantly. Wrong. Your body aches too much to lie still. Your ears are still ringing from the symphony of hammer blows. Your arms twitch involuntarily, swinging at imaginary steel in your dreams like you're possessed by a blacksmithing ghost. You hurt in places you didn't know existed. You smell like struggle. Even your suffering is suffering. And your father's response? Good. Means you're improving. And in a twisted way, you are. You're not just surviving the pain. You're being sculpted by it. Toughened like the glowing bars you hammer every day. Pressed, heated, battered into shape. But don't get the wrong idea. By the time you officially reach adulthood, your body feels like it's already completed 2 entire lifetimes and collapsed halfway through both. And the worst part? This is barely the warm-up. In most occupations, smoke is an inconvenience. In yours, it's practically your chatty coworker, loud, obnoxious, and always in your face. The forge isn't just hot, it's a glorified smoke trap. Every breath tastes like roasted dust, molten iron, ashes, and pure despair. If you can see further than 6 feet ahead, that means someone forgot to stoke the fire. There's no chimney funneling anything out. There's a random hole in the ceiling that somehow manages to suck more smoke and then it releases. You try opening a window. Joke's on you. There is no window. Just soot-covered walls, your father hacking in the corner, and the rare gust of wind that blasts every particle straight into your eyeballs. Anyway, your lungs. Let's just say your lungs have entered a committed but wildly unhealthy relationship with smoke. At first it stings, then it annoys you, and eventually it becomes as familiar as breathing itself. Coughing sprees? Just part of the daily soundtrack. Blackened mucus? Gross, yes, but consistent, like an unfortunate morning ritual. You've reached the stage where clean air feels untrustworthy, like something is wrong if you're not inhaling fire-flavored dust. Even your voice evolves, or devolves, into something that sounds like a 60-year-old goat herder gargling molten tar. Every word comes out rough, every inhale shorter, your throat permanently hosting its own tiny sandstorm. But you keep working because you don't have the luxury of stopping. And it's not just the furnace smoke. There's metal dust from grinding, oily vapors from quenching, and occasionally the savory scent of fried leather, roasted wood, or whatever unlucky object accidentally fell into the fire. You've probably inhaled 3 different lethal substances before you've even had breakfast. Safety gear? Please. The best you've got is a sweat-soaked rag tied around your nose. And even that smells worse than the forge on a bad day. Take it off, and suddenly air is harder to pull into your chest. Keep it on, and you're basically breathing your own steamed despair. As for long-term consequences, oh, they're coming. Asthma, lung rot, early death, it's the default benefits package. But you're not thinking about decades from now. You're thinking about fixing that slightly crooked gate hinge before your father sees it and has a medieval meltdown. In a blacksmith's world, air isn't something you breathe for health. It's just another weight you have to lift to keep working. By this point, you've developed a deep, complicated bond with your tools, something between resentment, dependency, and shared trauma. Your hammer? That thing may as well be grafted onto your arm. You've given it a name, insulted it daily, and swung it so often your shoulder clicks like a possessed maraca whenever you lift it. Without that hammer, you're just a sweaty kid standing inside a smoky cave. With it, you're a blacksmith, and also a magnet for fresh cuts and bruises. Your tongs are another story. Awkward, scorching, and guaranteed to pinch your hand exactly when you least expect it. You've burned your fingertips more often than you've successfully grabbed hot metal. The iron slips. The grip falters. You yell something unholy. Your father scolds you to hold it like you mean it. You briefly consider chucking the tongs into the fire out of pure spite. Your chisel? Once a proud, sharp tool. Now it's basically a tired suggestion of a blade, dulled by years of carving, splitting, scraping, and occasionally functioning as an emergency crowbar for neighbors who can't manage their own doors. Files, awls, punches, rivets. Your workbench looks like the inventory of a medieval torture chamber. And honestly, it behaves like one. You've been stabbed, crushed, pinched, sliced, scraped, and poked by every single object you've ever owned. At this point, your fingers have developed trauma reflexes. They flinch at the sight of any new tool approaching. Your apron. Let's talk about that heroic failure of a garment. It's supposed to protect you, and in a way it does. If protect means catching blazing hot metal fragments and holding them snug against your ribs like a warm, sizzling embrace. It's more burn marks than leather at this point. Every winter it stiffens up like a frozen corpse, and you have to wrestle it into shape just to tie it on. Still, despite all the scorches and betrayals, you treat your tools and gear like beloved relatives. You sharpen them, oil them, arrange them neatly each night because you understand one simple truth. If a tool breaks, you're doomed. No tool means no work. No work means no money. No money means no food. So yes, your tools are everything. But don't get sentimental. They've also launched an ongoing campaign against your fingers, your spine, and your remaining sanity. Every day they whisper, "We keep you alive, but we will also ruin you slowly." And you mutter back, "Fair enough. Hand me the hammer." You don't wear a crown, carry a blade into battle, or command soldiers. But without you, the entire village collapses before midweek. You're the blacksmith, and absolutely everybody relies on you for absolutely everything. You're the medieval version of customer support, IT repair, roadside service, and general problem solver rolled into one smoke-stained person who reeks of ash, sweat, and obligation. The knight wants a fresh sword? You forge it. The farmer snaps his plow? You mend it. The monk's bell cracks. The baker's oven door refuses to budge. The shepherd's gate latch breaks again. Guess who they come running to? Yep, you. Every single time. And they always arrive at the worst possible moment. Mid-swing, sweaty, impatient, caked in mud and entitlement. I know you're busy, but could you just? The cursed phrase. Could you just? It haunts your dreams. And the gratitude? Oh, non-existent. They assume it's simply your destiny. If their hoe holds up, if their shield doesn't shatter, if their chicken coop door stays shut, they walk off with a lazy nod like they're doing you a favor by letting you work at all. Payment is another adventure. Sometimes coin, sometimes goods, sometimes vague promises that dissolve by sunrise. One man once paid you with a dead chicken he swore was perfect for stew. It absolutely wasn't. You're also the designated fixer for disasters that you didn't cause. Gate bent because someone sat on it wrong? Fix it. Dagger snapped during a drunken brawl? Fix it. Strange hunk of metal nobody recognizes, but apparently must be repaired? Still your problem. Yet when praise comes, it's reserved for the knight with the shiny armor, the priest with the holy stories, or the miller with the fatter-than-average goat. Your background noise. The quiet machine that keeps everything working but gets zero glory. But deep down, you know a truth they'll never admit. Without you, the whole place would crumble. Their tools would break, their fields would stall, and their homes would literally fall apart. Their horses would drag their feet, and though no bard will ever carve your name into a ballad, the whole village stays standing because of what you do. You might assume peace is a blessing. No marauders charging through fields, no thieves skulking in the woods, no frantic noble shouting that he needs a blade right now. But for you, peace is a curse dressed as good news. Yes, you can forge plowshares and barn hinges, but the real money, the real survival, comes from conflict. When men are fighting, you're indispensable. Weapons, armor, piles of arrowheads, repairs by the dozen. Even horseshoes wear thin twice as fast under terrified cavalry. Work floods in. The forge blazes. Coin clinks into your hands. You collapse into bed every night, but at least you're fed, and your tab at the alehouse stays, temporarily, ignored. Then one morning the war ends. Some lord signs a treaty. The soldiers stop moving. Suddenly, your workshop falls silent. No more blades. No more helmets. Just a weary farmer wanting his sickle sharpened and offering 3 wilted onions because that's all he's got. Yes, you can craft pots, kettles, hinges, spits for the hearth, but there's barely a profit in any of it. People expect miracles from you, but want to pay you like you're mucking out their stables. You end up part trader, part beggar, part diplomat, trying to squeeze a fair wage from customers who act scandalized if you ask for more than a handful of coins. Raise your prices even a little? They stare like you've hexed their livestock. It's only metalwork, they say, as if glowing iron bends itself into shape while humming church hymns. And so you begin to long for the frenzy again. Not the gore, not the smoke from burnt homes, but the constant stream of orders, the purpose, the pulse of the forge. When knights crowded outside your door with cracked shields and jingling purses, you felt significant, needed, alive. Now you're making keys for doors nobody locks, repairing kettles that should have been thrown away decades ago, fixing tools so ancient they belong in a scholar's collection rather than a field. Peace brings comfort for everyone else. For you it brings empty pockets and a stomach that growls. And deep inside, though you'd never admit it, you catch yourself thinking a tiny clash wouldn't hurt, just a minor border quarrel. Because when steel breaks, you get to eat. Some trades have a finish line, a completed task, a moment of rest, maybe even a pat on the back and a warm meal. But forging? That's not one of them. Your work never ends. Not today, not tomorrow, not even in your sleep. Fix one thing, and 3 new problems limp through your door. Patch a hinge, the cart will collapses. Finish a bundle of nails, and suddenly the barn door falls off. Someone always arrives demanding 10 more items, each bigger, heavier, and needed yesterday. And of course, they smile and say the same line everyone says, "I'll pay you after harvest." Sure you will. You're awake before the first rooster even remembers its job, and you fall into bed long after the sun has vanished behind the treeline. Yet even when you finally lie down, your mind keeps swinging the hammer. You dream of bellows wheezing, sparks snapping, and that one villager who still owes you 6 eggs and a simple thanks. Even the so-called quick fixes aren't quick. A farmer bursts in carrying what used to be a rake, but now resembles a tortured bundle of metal. Just a little repair, they say. Sure, a tiny fix that takes 2 hours of heating, reshaping, pounding, and smiling politely as they pop their head in every few minutes to ask, "Done yet?" And just when you think you've earned a moment to sit, maybe drink something that isn't lukewarm, smoky, or slightly gritty, your apprentice dashes in, panicked. The farrier's fallen sick. The horse needs new shoes. Who else can do it? You, obviously. Because in this village, blacksmith roughly translates to the person everyone calls when all other options fail. The forge itself is needier than half the villagers. The fire sulks if you don't feed it. The tools rot if you forget them for a day. The anvil shifts in the blistering heat of summer. The bellows stiffen and crack in winter. Everything you own is either breaking, already broken, or plotting to break soon. Even holidays ignore you. Sunday is supposed to be sacred, unless someone's ox cart decides to collapse on the way to market. Then you're jamming your apron over your head, half asleep, silently begging the priest not to walk by while you're clanging metal on the one day you're not supposed to. You don't bother keeping a to-do list. That would imply there's an end. There isn't. Because being a blacksmith isn't an occupation. It's a loop. Work, repair, patch, repeat, over and over until either you fall apart or your hammer does. And the strangest part? You actually like it. There's something about the rhythm, the heat, the craft, even though it's slowly melting you. You'd think all that hammering from sunrise to starlight would earn you 2 basic rewards, a decent meal and an uninterrupted night's sleep. Wrong. In a medieval smithy, both dinner and dreams are optional luxuries, right up there with clean water, respectful customers, and days where nothing bursts into flames unexpectedly. Let's talk food. You burn through enough energy to fuel a warhorse, and what do you get in return? A chunk of rough bread. A bowl of cold pottage flavored with yesterday's turnip. Maybe, a scrap of salted pork if fortune smiles, which she rarely does. You eat standing up, one hand gripping tongs because something is always cooling too fast. the other shielding your meal from drifting forge ash. Meals are not meals, they're interruptions. Conversation becomes a sequence of grunts. And if someone knocks mid-bite because their door latch jammed, guess what? Your stew is now a cold sacrifice to the gods of inconvenience. You don't eat for pleasure. You eat because collapsing would be bad for business. You don't eat for pleasure. You eat for fuel. Food in, fire out. Calories become hammer blows. That's the deal. Now sleep. Or the sad imitation of sleep you scrape together. By the time you finally collapse into bed, your hands pulse like drums, your spine feels like it went 12 rounds with a mule, and your ears still hum with the day's endless metal choir. Your mattress is a bag of straw that's either too hard, too soft, or hosting tiny creatures with personal vendettas. Your blanket is a half-burnt sheet of wool that permanently smells of smoke, stale ale, and poor life choices. And right as your eyelids drift shut, your mind kicks awake. That job you didn't finish. That hinge that bent in a suspicious way. That wagon wheel repair you still haven't been paid for since the last full moon. Sleep becomes a bargaining process. You twist, you shuffle, you calculate how long you can postpone someone's repair before they show up pounding at your door before sunrise. And of course, there are the midnight emergencies. A horse loses a shoe. A storm tears someone's shutters off. A noble decides their sword absolutely must be sharpened before a morning hunt. Because apparently, you have no basic human need for rest. You learn to survive on fragments, stolen mouthfuls, brief doses, stubborn willpower. In your world, production outranks hunger, and urgency outranks exhaustion. Food and sleep aren't pauses in your job. They're the very short commercials between the real program, work. You eat when you're able. You sleep when the universe permits. And you pray the forge doesn't snuff itself out while you're unconscious. There was once a time, vaguely, distantly, when your hands were soft. Probably when you were a child. Now, they're wreckage. Your fingers aren't digits anymore. They're tools. Rigid, swollen, split, and rough to the point where they don't register anything unless it's pain. A quill? Forget it. Bootlaces? A battle. But a pair of glowing hot tongs? You grab those without hesitation. Burns stopped maturing ages ago. Every joint cracks like old sapwood. Your knuckles appear permanently bruised, victims of countless hammer strikes. Your palms look like a topographical map made entirely of scars. Layers of blisters, fresh ones, healing ones, ancient ones, stacked like the growth rings of a tree. Want to know what season it is? Count the blisters. More than 5. Summer. You've lost fingernails multiple times. Some fell off clean. Others, not so clean. Once you smashed your thumbs so badly, it turned the color of midnight for 2 weeks. Did you rest? No. You simply switched to your other hand and muttered aggressively while working. Cuts. They're as common as breathing. Sometimes from chipped tools, sometimes from metal edges, always from the job. Sometimes the file snaps at you like a temperamental dog. Sometimes the metal itself decides it wants a rematch. Every few days you're leaving a trail of blood from some fresh injury. You wrap your wound in whatever scrap cloth is closest, mutter a few choice curses, and carry on swinging. But the burns, those are the real monsters. Some are tiny kisses of pain, little reminders that hot iron does not negotiate. Others, the kind that hiss, blister, and carve memories into your skin whether you want them or not. You've scorched yourself, so often you might as well start charging rent for the branding marks. At this point, the shock is gone. Burns are just part of the daily agenda. Your grip, though, your grip is terrifying. You could crack nuts, bones, or egos without trying. But fine motor skills completely abandoned you. You drop tools. Your hands tremble in cold weather. You're barely 30, but your fingers look like they belong to an elderly warrior who lost half his battles and now hustles drunks at dice for dinner. Yet these wrecked hands keep your life turning. They forge blades, mend hinges, and wield the hammer that keeps your name worth mentioning. They ache without pause, but they obey. Because in this trade, your body can fall apart piece by piece. As long as you can still lift that hammer, you're not done. Now let's talk scent, or the tragic absence of anything pleasant. You do not smell good. In fact, clean is just a myth from your childhood. The day you became your father's apprentice was the day your natural aroma took a nosedive into a swamp of burnt fat, ash, and despair. Welcome to the olfactory nightmare that is being a blacksmith. The forge burns nonstop, and you marinate in that smoke. It soaks into your clothes, sticks to your skin, and settles into your hair as if paying rent. Your sweat no longer smells like human sweat. It's more like half-cooked meat forgotten on a sunny day. Baths, technically possible, realistically pointless. Cold water, scarce time, and the knowledge that within an hour you'll be soot-coated again. Why bother? Your clothes certainly don't help. The same charred shirt, the same battle-scarred leather apron. They haven't known true cleanliness since the last village festival, where someone spilled ale all over you anyway. Now they cling to you like a hardened shell of smoke, grease, and resignation. Perfume? Not a chance. It evaporates within minutes. Flowers droop around you. Bread crusts faster. Cats decide you're a demon and flee accordingly. And yes, people notice. You walk into the tavern, and the patrons scatter like pigeons chased by a hungry dog. The innkeeper quietly guides you to the corner table near a window, less a courtesy, more a public safety measure. Nobody wants to share a bench with someone who smells like a burned picket fence mixed with wet charcoal. Still, you accept it. Better to be infamous than invisible. People point and say, "There goes the blacksmith," with equal parts admiration and clipped breaths. You'd think after a lifetime tending the flames, shaping red-hot iron, and inhaling more smoke than a collapsing chimney, you'd somehow escape the final bill your body intends to collect. But no, the debt comes due. It always does. After decades of standing too close to the fire and too far from rest, the decline doesn't arrive with fanfare or sudden disaster. It just inches in quietly, like a thief slipping through the back door you forgot to latch. At first, it's subtle. Your knees complain when you rise after a long session at the anvil. The ache starts small, just a whisper, then a murmur, then a low, constant growl that never truly stops. Each morning, you attempt to straighten yourself, and your spine says, "No, thank you." It's as if your bones have grown stubborn with age, deciding they'd rather stay shaped like the letter C. You bent into them through years of stooping over glowing iron. Your hands, once capable of gripping unruly metal into obedience, now tremble when you reach for a cup of water. Your grip, which could twist horseshoes like vines, shakes when lifting a small wooden bowl. The very fingers that once coaxed sharpness into blades now struggle with buttons on your tunic. Your joints crack like snapping twigs whenever you flex them, and half the time you're not sure if the sound came from the fire or your own knuckles. But you don't complain. Who would listen anyway? In this life, aches are as normal as sunrise, and pain is simply another member of the household. You accept it the same way you accepted burns, cuts, sweat, and smoke, silently, with the grim resignation of someone who's run out of alternative options. The forge still burns, but you no longer move with the same force you once commanded. Your swing falters. The hammer that once felt like an old friend now behaves like an uncooperative beast, growing heavier every morning, as though it has begun to resist your grip. You lift it, but the fire in your arm is gone. The strength remains only in memory. You don't go out in a blaze of glory. There's no triumphant final blow that rings across the village. No heroic end where you craft a sword so divine it becomes legend. Your story doesn't wrap up like the songs of warriors or kings. Instead, your departure happens quietly. Not death, but the slow withdrawal from a craft that consumed your life. You begin handing off the small tasks first. Tongs that slip in your grip go straight to the child who waits by your side. You ask him to pump the bellows, not because you're teaching, but because your lungs insist. When it's time to shape a blade, you guide more with words than with your hammer. Your body refuses to follow instructions the way it used to. Your son watches. You see your younger self reflected in his eyes, curious, nervous, half terrified. He's already got the smell of the forge on him, that mixture of ash, sweat, old smoke, and roasted leather. His hands are small now, but you know what's coming. The blisters, the bruises, the little scars that never quite fade. He's only a child, but in this world, Childhood ends the moment you can lift something without falling over. You train him because someone must. There's no else to tend the fire when your arms give out completely. You show him how to tell the temperature of iron not by touch. Gods, never by touch, but by the color. You teach him the difference between a tap and a blow. You tell him the first rule, listen to the metal. The second rule, don't flinch. And the unspoken third, pain is part of the job. When he winces at a spark landing on his wrist, you scold him gently. Not because you're cruel, but because hesitation is dangerous. In the forge, fear gets you burned. And you know someday, he'll stand where you're standing, teaching the same lessons to a boy who carries his name. You find yourself sitting more often, watching more than working, observing him take the hammer in hand and lift it with a confidence you once had. His growing muscles coil with that first taste of pride, shaping iron into useful things, into powerful things. You speak less, but your eyes follow every move he makes. Little by little, the villagers begin to notice. They greet you with respect, nodding out of habit or gratitude or maybe pity. But when they step inside the workshop, their eyes drift not to you, but to the boy. They walk past you to hand him the broken hoe, the bent latch, the dented helmet. They still say your name, but they speak to him. And you realize that's how the change happens, quietly, naturally, without ceremony. You're not the blacksmith anymore. Not truly. You're the shadow sitting near the forge. The old man who tells stories between wheezes. The living reminder that even iron weakens with time. Yet you feel pride like a warm ember that refuses to die. Watching him stand where you once stood, hearing the clear ring of hammer hitting metal, seeing the sparks fly from his hands. That's worth more than coin, more than praise, more than your own fading strength. The boy is becoming the blacksmith. The forge has chosen its next keeper. You were never wealthy. The craft never promised riches. Your clothes were always patched, your meals simple, your roof leaky in the winter. And still, you kept showing up every morning because this was what kept the village alive. Your work built doors, plows, chains, shoes, hinges, axes. You shaped the bones of the town. Now the fire depends on him. You start forgetting things, small things at first. Where you left a tool, what you were planning to fix next. The name of a villager you've known for 20 years. Then the bigger pieces slip, the old techniques, the special angles, the way to read the hiss of steam. Your son asks questions, and you fumble for answers that once lived at the tip of your tongue. You feel the forge drift away from you, like a horse pulling out of your grip. It's still familiar, but no longer yours. And that scares you more than the ache in your bones. Even so, you don't resent it. Because this is how the work outlives the worker. It's not about the hammer. It's about the hands that will carry it after yours fail. Your breathing gets worse. Years of inhaling soot, coal dust, metal filings, and whatever unholy fumes drifted up from the quenched barrel have finally taken their toll. Every cough feels deeper, every breath thinner. When you lie down at night, your chest whistles like bellows with a hole in them. You ignore it. There's nothing to be done about it anyway. Your voice changes too. It grows raspy, cracking around the edges like a tool worn beyond sharpening. When you call out instructions, it doesn't carry like before. Sometimes your son leans close and says, "What?" And you have to repeat yourself louder, even though the effort stings your throat. You stop trying to hide your exhaustion. The villagers see. Your son sees. The world sees. But no one speaks of it. One day the hammer slips from your grip. It hits the ground with a flat, insulting thud, and you realize you can't pick it up again. Not with dignity. Not with certainty. Your fingers refuse to close. Your wrist trembles. Your arm shakes like it's holding the weight of the entire forge rather than a tool you've lifted thousands of times. Your son rushes to pick it up for you. He places it back on its hook without a word. He pretends like nothing happened, but you both know. That was the last time you'd hold it. From that moment on, you become the advisor, not the smith. The storyteller, not the craftsman. The memory instead of the force. You sit by the fire watching your boy become a man. And though the forge no longer answers to you, it still glows with familiar light. Warm, steady, unending. You realize something then. Something your father must have understood all those years ago when his hands first began to fail. You were never shaping iron. You were shaping the one who would shape it next. Your legacy isn't the tools, or the weapons, or the hinges, or even the forge. Your legacy stands in front of you, covered in soot and determination. Your son works with the same stubbornness you once had, swinging your old hammer now with confidence instead of trembling. He doesn't flinch at sparks anymore. He knows when to pull the blade, when to quench it, when to turn it. He knows which noise means trouble, which glow means ready, which smell means danger. He has become what you always hoped he'd be, not just a blacksmith, but a keeper of the craft, a guardian of the fire. Years pass like fading embers, each one glowing briefly before darkening. You move slower. You sleep more. The forge hums on without your hands. And the world, as it always does, adjusts. Your son builds things you never had the strength or skill to attempt. Bigger gates, better hinges, finer blades. People speak his name with respect. They tell stories of his skill. You sit in the corner listening, swelling with pride, even as your breath grows shallow. One evening, while the fire crackles and the sun sinks behind the hills, he comes to sit beside you. He doesn't speak at first. He just lets the silence settle, the kind of silence you rarely heard when the forge was your world. "Father," he says softly, almost a whisper, "teach me the last thing." You chuckle, though the sound rattles. "What last thing?" "The thing you haven't told me yet." You look at him, at his scarred fingers, his steady eyes, the soot smudged across his cheek. He's no child anymore. He's the blacksmith. Your blacksmith. The village's blacksmith. The future's blacksmith. So you tell him the truth, the thing no one ever said out loud to you. The fire must never die. Not your fire. Not his fire. The fire. The forge. The craft. The purpose. You place your hand over his, the one that now holds the hammer you can't lift, and say, "As long as the flame burns, our family lives." He nods. He understands. You didn't choose this life. It chose you, and now it's chosen him. One morning, you don't rise. You don't feel the weight of the apron. You don't smell the smoke. You don't hear the clang. But the forge still roars, and your son stands where you once stood, steady, strong, unflinching, carrying the fire you passed on. The world continues. The hammer swings. The fire glows. The line endures. Your story is over. But the forge lives on. Most smiths never grow old. Not truly. Their bodies erode long before the years catch them. Smoke poisons their lungs grain by grain. Their joints grind down like two stones rubbing themselves into dust, and their hearts grow weary from decades of standing beside a fire that never sleeps. So when their final day arrives, it rarely comes as a surprise. But the odd thing is, when a blacksmith finally leaves the world behind, the work he shaped does not. What he forged lives on, threaded quietly into the bones of his village. A nail hammered into the door of a chapel. A sword hanging from a noble's hip. A horseshoe clinging faithfully to a mare's hoof. A hinge creaking open on a barn that will stand long after he's gone. His legacy isn't carved in stone or sung in tavern halls. It hides in simple, sturdy things, the everyday artifacts that hold life together. He leaves behind no shining monuments, no ornate record of his deeds. Only the tools he once gripped, the scars on his palms, and a child who now grips the same hammer. And for the world he inhabited, that is more than enough. When death finally takes him, it comes quietly. There is no spectacle, no banners, no ceremonial armor. He is lowered into an unadorned grave with nothing but his name carved into a plank of wood. No jewels, no gilded coffin, just the earth and a handful of mourners. The forge down the road still glows, still smokes, still rings. Even in death, he cannot silence it. Every clang of iron that echoes through the village after he is gone feels like a heartbeat he left behind. He was not a knight. He never mounted a horse in shining armor or brandished a polished blade in the sun. But he created that armor. He never rode into battle, yet his hands crafted the swords, spearheads, and shields that others trusted with their lives. He never sowed the fields, but he made the plows that carved the soil. He never baked the bread, but every oven door that kept the heat in, he forged it. He did not raise the castle walls, but every nail driven into its timbers, every hinge holding its gate upright, bore the mark of his fire. He was the village blacksmith, and in a world lit by torchlight and ruled by steel, that meant everything. While nobles haggled over borders and kings traded crowns, he stood in the same spot each sunrise, striking life into iron. Day after day, year after year, he shaped civilization in small, steady increments, one bracket, one rivet, one buckle at a time. None of his creations were celebrated, but without them the kingdom would collapse. His legacy was quiet but indestructible. No one sang ballads of his hammer. No wandering bard praised the beauty of his tongs. Yet every turning wheel, every unbroken blade, every door that opened instead of falling off its frame, all of it bore silent testimony to his craft. Villagers walking past his workshop saw nothing more than smoke drifting lazily into the sky and the silhouette of a man bending over the anvil. They smelled burnt wool, sweat, and soot, and assumed that was the whole story. But within those hot, dark walls was something greater. A kind of primitive music, metal on metal, fire meeting air, creation born in sparks. He didn't only shape iron. He shaped the world around him, piece by piece. Even after his hands were still, the forge did not dim. His son stepped into the firelight. His grandson would someday do the same. The man's name might vanish from memory, but the tools he shaped would outlive him, handed down, used, repaired, and used again. He was never crowned, nor honored, nor lifted onto a pedestal. And yet without him and men like him, nothing would have moved. No carts, no armies, no trade, no harvest. He was the uncredited architect beneath the chronicles of kings, the ember that smoldered beneath the stories of conquest. In a world built from wood and stone and human determination, he was the fire that breathed transformation into raw ore. He didn't simply live in the world. He kept it in motion. But long before medieval smiths struck sparks in dim workshops, another kind of fire burned. One not of iron, but of mysticism. Before alchemy became the secret obsession of medieval scholars hiding in candlelit rooms, it was something older, deeper, and far more sacred. The true origins of alchemy do not begin in Europe at all. They begin where the world itself rose from black soil, the ancient land of Egypt. The Egyptians had a word, chemia. It came from chem, meaning the black land, named for the rich, fertile earth the Nile left in its wake each year. But the color black did not symbolize darkness or death to them. It stood for possibility, raw, unshaped matter brimming with potential. Egypt itself was a metaphor, a living symbol of transformation. Flooded land turned to harvest. Death turned to eternity. Clay shaped into gods. From chemia would eventually come the Greek alchemia, and later the word we know, alchemy. But before medieval dreamers chased the fantasy of turning lead into gold, the Egyptians practiced transformation in every aspect of life. Alchemy was not a science in their eyes. It was a sacred process, a mirror of creation itself. They found alchemy in the embalming chambers where bodies were purified and prepared for the afterlife. In the temples where priests mixed oils and minerals into healing balms. In the bakers' ovens where grain became bread, and in the brewers' jars where barley became beer. It lived in the cycles of stars, the rise and fall of the river, the flicker of a flame. Transformation was their divine language, and at the heart of that language was a god. Thoth, scribe of the heavens, keeper of magic, lord of knowledge, and guardian of the moon. Depicted with the head of an ibis and a lunar disk crowning him, Thoth represented balance, wisdom, and cosmic order. Where chaos threatened, he wrote harmony into existence. Egyptian legends insisted he did not merely witness the mysteries of transformation, he created them. They believed he recorded thousands of sacred manuscripts filled with secrets too powerful for ordinary people. But one fragment of his vast wisdom supposedly survived the rise and fall of empires. A small, cryptic artifact whispered about for millennia, the Emerald Tablet. The Emerald Tablet, brief, strange, poetic, held only a short passage, barely more than a dozen lines. Yet alchemists across centuries believe those lines concealed the essence of creation. It opened with a sentence that has echoed through ages like a spell. As above, so below. As below, so above. This principle of correspondence claimed that the human soul is a reflection of the universe, that the world of matter mirrors the world of spirit, that every transformation in the laboratory mimics a transformation in the cosmos. The tablet did not claim to show how to make gold. Instead, it mapped out a way of seeing. It taught that nothing in existence is static. Everything can rise, fall, refine, purify, ascend. Lead can become gold, yes, but ignorance can become wisdom. Confusion can become harmony. Mortality can touch divinity. It spoke of a one thing, the primal essence that flowed through heaven and earth, the source and end of all. Some read this as the philosopher's stone, others as the soul itself, the ether or consciousness. Yet the greatest enigma was its interpretation. Anyone could read the lines, but only a true seeker, a mind tempered like metal, could grasp them. And so, the tablet endured the collapse of dynasties, carried by scholars, mystics, and wanderers as it traveled beyond Egypt. Its next home was Persia. As the old Egyptian civilization waned, alchemical thought migrated along trade routes into the Persian world. But it did not remain unchanged. Persian philosophy reshaped it in profound ways, merging spiritual symbolism with a new way of understanding light, fire, and transformation. Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian faith, placed the universe in a constant struggle between purity and corruption, truth and deception, light and shadow. Fire, in this worldview, was not just warmth. It was holiness incarnate. Sacred flames burned in temples as symbols of divine wisdom, and that reverence for fire became the lifeblood of Persian alchemical practice. Yet the figure who gave alchemy its earliest coherent voice was not Persian by birth. He was Greek-Egyptian, Zosimos of Panopolis. Living in Roman Egypt during the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimos became one of the first alchemical writers whose words still survive. He was no ordinary scholar. His scrolls blended technical instruction with surreal visions, dreams filled with symbolic transformations. In one of his most famous visions, he saw himself dismembered, boiled, and remade in an alchemical furnace. Instead of fear, he felt revelation. For him, the death of the body symbolized the purification of the soul. Zosimos insisted that alchemy was never simply a craft for changing metals. It was a path of inner refinement. Just as ore must be broken, purified, and reshaped to become gold, so must the alchemist undergo suffering, cleansing, and rebirth to attain wisdom. In his writings, lions devour serpents, spirits rise from vats, men dissolve into colored vapors. These bizarre images were not recipes. They were metaphors for spiritual transformation. He also emphasized a truth that echoes through all esoteric traditions. Real knowledge cannot be purchased. It must be earned through patience, discipline, and awakening. The alchemist's crucible was a symbol of the seeker's heart. The fire that melted metal was the same fire that burned away ignorance. Through Zosimos and his successors, alchemy evolved into a hybrid art, part science, part mysticism, part philosophy. It carried threads of Egypt's sacred transformation, Persia's holy fire, and Greece's quest for understanding. And so, just as a blacksmith shapes iron in his furnace, so the ancient alchemists sought to shape both matter and spirit in the cosmic forge. One man forged the tools that let the medieval world move. Another sought the secrets that let the universe change. Both labored beside fire. Both transformed the raw into the refined. Both believed that heat, patience, and will could turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. From the humble forge to the emerald wisdom of antiquity, the story remains the same. To shape the world, whether iron or soul, you must step into the fire. Across the ancient world, knowledge often moved like a whisper through time, flickering, fading, and occasionally roaring back to life. Though many scrolls were forgotten, burned, or misinterpreted, one idea survived every empire that tried to claim or suppress it. Alchemy. It was no longer a rough sketch of early science. It had become a sacred language of transformation, both physical and spiritual. And as the last embers of Egyptian, Greek, and Persian wisdom glowed faintly in the ruins of old civilizations, a new force rose to seize, refine, and expand their legacy. When the Islamic Golden Age dawned between the 8th and 13th centuries, it did so with extraordinary brilliance. While much of Europe drifted through centuries of political chaos, disease, and intellectual stagnation, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, and Cordoba surged into a renaissance unparalleled at the time. These places became sanctuaries for scholars, translators, mathematicians, physicians, astronomers, and yes, alchemists. At the center of this intellectual explosion stood a man whose influence would bend the course of scientific history itself, Jabir ibn Hayyan, known to the Latin West as Geber. To call him merely a chemist or philosopher would be to shrink his legacy. He was both, and far more. Often celebrated as the father of chemistry, Jabir transformed alchemy from a mystical, symbolic art into a methodical, experimental discipline. Working under the Abbasid Caliphate, particularly in the court of the brilliant yet controversial Caliph Harun al-Rashid, Jabir approached the natural world with a rigor unheard of in earlier centuries. He introduced procedures that remain fundamental even today: distillation, crystallization, calcination, sublimation, evaporation, filtration. His laboratory methods were not guesswork, but structured, repeatable, testable processes. Jabir invented instruments, refined powerful acids, documented chemical reactions, and authored over 100 works, some practical, others deeply philosophical. Yet he never abandoned the mystical foundations from which alchemy had arisen. For him, matter and spirit were inseparable. The universe, he believed, was woven from 4 elemental essences: earth, air, fire, water, each infused with spiritual properties. To understand matter was to understand the hidden geometry of creation itself. Numerology, astrology, cosmology, and symbolism all intertwined in his system. He believed that every transformation in nature, whether metal changing form or a plant releasing its essence, reflected a parallel transformation in the soul. Balance, or mizan, stood at the heart of his teachings. Just as the human body required harmony to remain healthy, metals required perfect equilibrium to become truly noble. Gold, in Jabir's eyes, was the most balanced of all materials, the physical embodiment of perfection. And if balance could be artificially achieved through careful manipulation, then even the humblest metal could ascend. This revolutionary insight traveled far beyond the borders of the Islamic world. Slowly, through the labor of translators and scholars, Jabir's writings slipped into Europe, sometimes credited, sometimes plagiarized, often misunderstood, but always influential. Without knowing it, generations of European alchemists built their dreams on the foundations laid by a Persian genius. Through Jabir, alchemy evolved into something unprecedented, a systematic science that still held its mystical heart. It became a bridge between what could be measured and what could only be experienced. While the Muslim world expanded ancient knowledge with precision and creativity, Europe remained cloaked in superstition, fragmentation, and theological rigidity. But knowledge has its own ways of traveling. Ideas carried in ink or memory have no borders. Slowly, alchemy crept westward, hidden in manuscripts, carried by traders, preserved by scholars, and smuggled through languages. One of the great crossroads where this exchange occurred was Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain. Cities like Toledo and Cordoba became living libraries where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked side by side, translating Greek, Persian, and Arabic texts into Latin. This collaboration, rare for its time, became the bridge that reintroduced Europe to the wisdom it had long forgotten. By the 12th century, Europe was starved for knowledge. The rediscovery of ancient texts, especially on alchemy, sparked a cultural awakening. What arrived was not merely technical chemistry. It was alchemy at its fullest, a fusion of physical experimentation, cosmology, esoteric symbolism, and spiritual philosophy. Monasteries began hiding strange books behind religious scriptures. Monks, curious and courageous, experimented with metals not only to purify them, but to purify their own souls. In secret rooms illuminated by flickering candlelight, philosophers pored over translated Arabic manuscripts like the Toba Philosophorum, an enigmatic dialogue of ancient sages discussing nature's hidden workings, and the Picatrix, a vast grimoire filled with astrological and alchemical lore. These works were more than collections of recipes. They were ideological seeds. They carried entirely new worldviews into European consciousness, worldviews that encouraged transformation, aspiration, and intellectual rebellion. But they also carried danger. Alchemy challenged the rigid social order. If lead could become gold, could a peasant become noble? Could humanity evolve without the church's permission? Its allure grew precisely because it sat outside the boundaries of accepted doctrine. By the late Middle Ages, alchemy had become an obsession in Europe. The flame that once burned in ancient Egypt, Persia, and Baghdad now flickered in monasteries, private studies, and the shadowy corners of castles. And from this fascination emerged a single symbol, mysterious, powerful, endlessly debated, that came to define Western alchemy: the philosopher's stone. By the High Middle Ages, alchemy had taken on an almost mythic aura. It was no longer simply a scholarly pursuit. It was a quest, holy, secretive, and deeply personal. At the heart of that quest resided the philosopher's stone. To the untrained, the stone was the ultimate prize, a substance capable of transmuting base metals into gold and granting immortality through the elixir of life. But to true alchemists, the stone was never merely physical. It was a symbol of inner transformation, the culmination of the soul's evolution toward perfection. The stone appeared in manuscripts under countless names: lapis philosophorum, the red stone, the elixir, the powder of projection. Some alchemists described it as a crimson crystal. Others insisted it was a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment. But all agreed it represented the highest form of transformation. European intellectuals like Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, and, later, Paracelsus devoted their lives to decoding the hidden logic of nature. They built elaborate furnaces, mapped the heavens, experimented with minerals, and composed cryptic treatises filled with dragons, serpents, kings, and suns, symbols encoding the stages of both material and spiritual purification. The creation of the stone followed a schema known as the magnum opus, or great work. It unfolded in 4 symbolic stages: nigredo, the blackening, the breaking down of old forms; death, decay, dissolution. The ego first had to be shattered before transformation could begin; albedo, the whitening, a cleansing of impurities, symbolizing purification of intentions and clarity of purpose; citronitas, the yellowing, illumination, awakening, the first glimpse of the inner light; rubedo, the reddening, rebirth, transformation, the emergence of the perfected essence, the philosopher's stone. But why speak in metaphor instead of plain instruction? Because alchemists believed true transformation was not meant for the unprepared. Only those capable of understanding symbolic language could approach the stone. Only those who had undergone inner purification could grasp outer perfection. For many, the stone promised gold. But for the wisest, the stone represented the perfection of the soul. As alchemy took deeper root in medieval Europe, it began to recede into secrecy. What had once been discussed openly in temples or scholarly courts now retreated into coded manuscripts, hidden chambers, and obscure societies. The reasons were both practical and philosophical. The Christian Church wielded immense power, and its relationship with alchemy was complex. Some mystics saw alchemy as harmonious with Christian doctrine. The purification of metal mirrored spiritual redemption, and the resurrection of matter reflected the resurrection of Christ. But many theologians viewed alchemy with suspicion, even hostility. The idea that humans could manipulate nature, achieve hidden knowledge, or aspire to divine transformation threatened established hierarchies. To avoid persecution, alchemists hid their teachings behind allegory. Thus began the era of secret brotherhoods. The Rosicrucians, whose enigmatic manifestos emerged in the 17th century, claimed descent from ancient Egyptian and Islamic alchemical wisdom. Whether they truly existed as an organized order is debated, but their influence on esoteric thought was immense. Their writings blended alchemical symbolism with visions of spiritual awakening, universal harmony, and hidden sciences. Likewise, the Freemasons, though historically rooted in guilds of stoneworkers, adopted symbols and rituals that echoed deeply with alchemical philosophy. Their ceremonies emphasized purification, enlightenment, and the construction of the inner temple, themes that paralleled the alchemists' great work. Whether these groups practiced literal alchemy remains uncertain. What is clear is that the symbolic language of alchemy, its metaphors of fire, transformation, light, and renewal, became central to their systems of spiritual development. Alchemy, once a public art, had become a whispered tradition. Yet its influence persisted, shaping mysticism, science, philosophy, and eventually the birth of modern chemistry itself. Alchemy, pushed to the margins by the rise of laboratory science, did not disappear. It simply shifted its shape and found safety in shadows. The thinkers who clung to the old art developed new mechanisms to protect it, building veils of imagery and labyrinths of symbolism to hide their teachings from prying eyes. And among these hidden relics of the tradition, few were as enigmatic as the so-called books of secrets. Some of these arcane volumes carried instructions in plain language, but others locked their wisdom behind dense allegory. One of the most mysterious was the Mutus Liber, this silent book. It offered no explanations, no paragraphs of careful instruction, not even a line of text. Instead, it whispered through pictures alone, a sequence of cryptic tableaus, figures carrying flasks beneath the moon, gardens, fountains, stars pouring into vessels, and alchemists working in symbolic landscapes. Every illustration was a riddle, every image a step in the great work. If you could not read the language of symbols, the book remained mute. But to the initiated, it was as eloquent as scripture. Other manuscripts spoke in the green language, a tongue built out of puns, double meanings, playful inversions, and poetic riddles. Words were chosen not for clarity, but for concealment. A term that seemed mundane could reveal a cosmic principle if turned the right way. The untrained reader found only confusion, the adept found revelation. This deliberate obscurity was both shield and initiation, ensuring that only those with patience, intuition, and inner discipline could reach the heart of the craft. Thus the alchemist lived two lives. In the daylight world, he appeared as a healer, a monk, a scholar, or a curious natural philosopher, quiet, respectable, harmless. But behind closed doors, in chambers lit by flickering oil lamps, he was something radically different, a seeker of hidden fire, a traveler between matter and spirit, a rebel chasing the divine through the language of metals and the grammar of flame. His world was one of contradictions, obedience on the outside, revolution within. Yet the secrecy that threatened to smother alchemy also kept it alive. Hidden under layers of metaphor, passed quietly from teacher to apprentice, the tradition survived the centuries like a glowing ember buried deep under ashes. It continued to breathe, to evolve, to adapt. And in time, it would face its greatest adversary, the birth of the scientific age. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Europe stood on the edge of an intellectual transformation. A new worldview, sharp, rational, empirical, began spreading through universities and academies. Scholars demanded clarity. They insisted on proof. The riddling symbolism that had protected alchemy for millennia suddenly fell out of place in a world obsessed with logic and measurable evidence. The shift did not happen in an instant. Many who would become pioneers of chemistry were once students of alchemy. They simply redirected their attention. Instead of using furnaces to refine the soul, they sought to refine their techniques. Instead of chasing the perfection of spirit, they focused on the composition of matter itself. The legendary Robert Boyle, often honored as the father of modern chemistry, delivered one of the decisive blows. In The Skeptical Chemist, 1661, he proposed that matter was composed not of the four classical elements, earth, air, fire, water, but of tiny particles assembled in different ways. He rejected the obscurity that coated earlier texts, urging thinkers to treat experimentation as a disciplined craft rather than a mystical ritual. Boyle did not despise the alchemists. He simply removed the cloak of allegory from their work. Where they saw dragons, he saw reactions. Where they saw cosmological metaphors, he saw testable phenomena. Then came Antoine Lavoisier, who revealed the true nature of combustion, named oxygen and hydrogen, and demolished the ancient elemental theory for good. After him, the pieces of the periodic table slowly fell into place. Laboratories replaced monasteries. Glassware replaced arcane diagrams. Precision instruments replaced symbolic dragons and suns. Alchemy, once at the center of the intellectual world, now appeared to many as a relic, a curious ancestor to chemistry, but ultimately outdated. Yet the strange irony endured. Without alchemy, chemistry would never have been born. The apparatus, the solvents, the methods of distillation and purification, all came from the long lineage of the alchemists' workshops. The new discipline inherited the tools while discarding the metaphysics. Governments began funding chemical research instead of arcane study. The philosopher's stone was quietly supplanted by the microscope. The Athanor furnace gave way to the Bunsen burner. Material progress demanded efficiency, not metaphor. And still, a few embers glowed in hidden corners of the human spirit. Alchemy retreated from the world of science and re-emerged as a symbol, a way of understanding transformation that transcended experiments and equations. It lingered in the imagination, whispering of the unity between matter and spirit, of the deep relationship between outer change and inner evolution. Even as modernity marched forward, the alchemist's fire remained alive, burning quietly beneath the surface. Alchemy did not die, it metamorphosed. Its physical practices became chemistry, but its symbolic and philosophical insights migrated into new territories: medicine, mythology, occultism, art, spirituality, and eventually psychology. In the 20th century, a new kind of alchemist appeared. He wore no robes, kept no furnaces, and melted no metals. Instead, he explored the furnace of the human mind. Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, unlocked the psychological dimension of alchemy and restored meaning to the symbols long dismissed as nonsense. To Jung, the alchemists were not merely experimenting with metals. They were projecting their inner states onto matter. The stages of the great work reflected the stages of the human soul. Nigredo, the blackening, represented despair, confusion, the breaking down of old identity. Albedo, the whitening, represented purification and self-awareness. Citronidas, the yellowing, brought illumination, the dawning of consciousness. And rubedo, the reddening, symbolized the birth of the integrated self, the completed philosopher's stone. In Jung's reading, the stone was not a literal substance, but the culmination of psychological wholeness. Individuation, the forging of a complete human being. Alchemy, then, had always been chasing more than metallic change. It had been mapping the path of the inner world. Today, echoes of alchemy form the backbone of countless stories and philosophies. Heroes descend into darkness only to return reborn, mirroring the alchemist's journey. Self-help culture speaks of transformation, refinement, purification, ancient alchemical terms disguised in modern language. Even in science, the spirit of the old art persists. Nuclear physicists literally transmute elements, turning one substance into another. Researchers explore dark matter, cosmic origins, unified fields, mysteries that once danced in the minds of alchemists under different names. But the essence remains unchanged, the search for what lies beneath the visible world. Alchemy's greatest legacy may be its unshakable belief in the unity of spirit and matter, that to reshape the world, one must also reshape oneself. that every experiment is a mirror held up to the soul. The alchemist's fire has simply found a new home, not in crucibles, but in people, not in hidden workshops, but in the questions we ask about who we are and who we might yet become. Transformation, the heartbeat of alchemy, continues. At first glance, Cappadocia appears almost unreal, a landscape sculpted by wind and time, dotted with slender stone towers and rippling valleys that look like the strokes of a painter's brush. Travelers marvel at the whimsical shapes rising from the earth, unaware that the most astonishing wonders lie hidden beneath the soil. Because under this strange, dreamlike terrain lies a forgotten world, vast, ancient, and carved by human hands. Cappadocia is home to hundreds of subterranean cities, some of them plunging 18 stories deep, stretching through miles of interconnected corridors. These were not mere hideouts or caves. They were complete civilizations beneath the earth, living quarters, food stores, stables, wineries, chapels, schools, council chambers, and wells tapping into deep aquifers. Entire communities once disappeared underground for months at a time. And the strangest part? Many of these cities remained hidden until the 20th century. In 1963, a man renovating his house in the quiet town of Derinquiu struck a wall that should not have been there. When he broke through it, expecting only rock, he found a passageway. The passage led to a chamber, the chamber to a staircase spiraling into darkness. What he had stumbled upon was the gateway to one of the largest underground cities ever uncovered, a sprawling, multi-level metropolis carved into volcanic stone. It was as if a whole civilization had slipped beneath the surface of the earth and then vanished, leaving behind a silent skeleton of tunnels and rooms waiting to be rediscovered. But Derinquiu was only the beginning. Archaeologists soon uncovered dozens, then hundreds, of similar underground settlements across the region. Many were vast and carefully engineered. Narrow corridors linked one city to another, forming a web of secret routes beneath the landscape. Massive circular stone doors could be rolled shut from the inside to block invaders. Air shafts channeled breathable air through multiple levels. Wells provided fresh water even during long sieges. These cities were not carved out in fear, they were carved with mastery. With intention. Why, then, did people choose to build entire worlds beneath the surface? Historians have debated this question for decades. Some argue they were refuges from invasion. Others believe they sheltered persecuted religious communities. Some whisper older, stranger theories, remnants of forgotten cultures predating written history. Yet whatever their origins, one truth stands. Cappadocia was designed to be not only lived in but protected. A sanctuary beneath a sanctuary. A world beneath a world. To understand how these subterranean kingdoms were carved, we must understand the land itself. Cappadocia is built from the ruins of ancient volcanoes. Millions of years ago, violent eruptions buried the region under thick layers of ash. Over time, the ash hardened into a soft but durable rock called tuff. This rock was a sculptor's dream, yielding easily to even simple tools but strong enough to support structures that lasted for centuries. Wind and water carved the surface of Cappadocia into pillars, cones, and bizarre shapes known as fairy chimneys. But early inhabitants realized that the real gift was underground. They could carve out chambers with little effort. These stone sanctuaries stayed cool in summer, warm in winter, and protected their inhabitants from danger. At first, people carved only small rooms, shelters, storage spaces, modest dwellings. But over generations, the underground labyrinth expanded. Caves became networks. Networks became cities. Cities became entire underground worlds. Builders carved stairways that wound downward like spirals of smoke. They designed ventilation shafts that reached the surface and circulated fresh air through levels far beneath the earth. They carved stables for livestock, kitchens with blackened ceilings, chapels adorned with crosses, hallways connecting one family to another. They engineered narrow passages that forced invaders to approach single file. They constructed massive stone wheels that could seal off sections of the city like medieval blast doors. And the deeper archaeologists explored, the stranger the story became. Some levels appear to predate recorded history. Others were expanded during the Hittite era, or the early Christian period, or times of Byzantine turmoil. Cappadocia became a refuge again and again, not just a place to hide, but a place to live. This land invited transformation. It turned stone into shelter, danger into defense, fear into ingenuity. Just as alchemists transformed metals in hidden chambers, ancient Cappadocians transformed mountains into sanctuaries, carving their hopes and fears into the earth itself. Their world was a testament to the oldest lesson of alchemy. If you cannot change the world above, carve a new one below. The land of Cappadocia was unlike any other, a region carved by time, wind, and fire into surreal shapes that seemed borrowed from the imagination of a god. Above the ground, tourists admired the dramatic landscape, towering stone spires, ridges etched by centuries of erosion, and fairy chimneys that jutted from the earth like natural monuments. But what lay beneath was a hidden marvel that even the most seasoned traveler could never imagine. For beneath the rolling hills and dusty towns, an entire civilization had etched itself into the volcanic stone. They did not build with wood or brick, nor did they rely on complex machinery or modern engineering. Instead, the people of Cappadocia carved patiently, deliberately, and with the singular goal of survival. The ground itself became more than a foundation. It became a fortress, a sky turned upside down, a labyrinth of shadow and stone filled with secrets. But secrets of what? Who were they hiding from? What danger drove them to bury entire communities underground, not temporarily, but for generations at a time? To understand, one must first step into the extraordinary discovery at Derenu. In 1963, a man renovating his modest home unknowingly struck the surface of history. Knocking down a wall in his basement, he stumbled upon a narrow, dark tunnel stretching beyond the reach of sight. One tunnel led to another, one chamber opened into a hall, and staircases spiraled ever downward. As explorers descended, they realized they were standing in a city that extended 18 stories below the surface. This was Derenu, the deepest and largest of Cappadocia's subterranean settlements, and what they uncovered was nothing short of astonishing. Unlike temporary shelters hastily dug to escape immediate danger, Derenu had been designed for extended habitation, a city meticulously crafted from volcanic rock. Its architecture was not random. Every corner, corridor, and chamber served a precise purpose. Living quarters were near the surface, offering quick access to daylight when it was safe. Deeper levels contained kitchens, workshops, storage for food and wine, stables for livestock, and even places of worship. Engineers had carved wells into underground aquifers, ensuring a continuous water supply, while ventilation shafts snaked to the surface, delivering fresh air to the lowest chambers. Massive rolling stone doors, perfectly fitted and movable from within, could seal tunnels in moments, creating impenetrable defenses. This was not a hideout born of panic. It was a city designed to endure months, perhaps even years, under threat. The scale alone is mind-boggling. Scholars estimate that Derenu could house up to 20,000 people, along with their animals and provisions, comfortably. Entire communities could vanish beneath the surface without leaving a trace. They maintained not only life, but culture, faith, and education. Churches, chapels, and baptismal rooms had been carved into the rock, some with intricate frescoes and crosses etched meticulously into walls. Schools existed for children. Communal kitchens and dining halls ensured that the necessities of life could continue undisturbed. Even in darkness, the city was alive with routine, structured for both survival and societal continuity. Yet for all its grandeur, one truth remains: we do not know who first built it. Some historians suggest early Christians fleeing Roman or Arab persecution expanded the city. Others argue that its roots extend far deeper, perhaps to the Hittites or the Phrygians thousands of years before Christ. The absence of inscriptions, carvings, or written records leaves us with mystery and conjecture. The tunnels, rooms, and chambers whisper no names, no dates, only the faint echo of lives hidden from the world above. And what were they hiding from? Conventional theory points to invaders. Central Anatolia was a crossroads of empires. Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and later Arab forces swept across the region over centuries. Underground cities would provide refuge, a place to outlast raids and attacks until the danger passed. But the depth, complexity, and precision of these cities suggest far more than short-term protection. Constructing a labyrinth of tunnels spanning dozens of levels, complete with ventilation, water systems, and defensive measures, required planning across generations. The earliest tunnels predate even Christianity. Who first carved them, and why, remains unknown. Some fringe theories propose more extraordinary possibilities. Could these cities have been designed to hide not just from armies, but from unknown entities? Ancient myths speak of gods descending from the sky, watchers who observed humanity, beings of immense power. Could fear of such beings have driven communities underground? There is no evidence, but the scale and secrecy of Cappadocia's cities make one wonder. Massive rolling doors, narrow defensive corridors, hidden escape routes, and labyrinthine designs all suggest the architects sought complete concealment. It is as if whatever threat existed hunted relentlessly, and only total disappearance could ensure survival. Imagine life in such a place. Not for a day or a week, but for months, even years. No sunlight, no open sky. Only flickering oil lamps illuminating stone corridors, the muffled sounds of neighbors moving above and below, the constant, muted heartbeat of life underground. Families occupied multi-room dwellings, carefully organized to balance privacy with communal living. Kitchens were placed strategically, often below surface level, so smoke would not overwhelm living areas. Bread baked in clay ovens filled the air with the warm, comforting scent that mingled with the ever-present damp aroma of stone and livestock. Livestock themselves were housed near entrances for ventilation, providing both warmth and food. Children went to school, learning reading, writing, and survival skills in rooms carved from stone. Religion and ritual were practiced in chapels and churches, where light filtered in through clever cuts in the rock or through oil lamps, casting flickering shadows across sacred frescoes. Despite the darkness and confined spaces, life in Daraniu was rich with routine, ceremony, and social order. Families married, children were born, and communities mourned the dead, all beneath layers of rock, hidden from the eyes of the world above. The design of these underground cities reflected a sophisticated understanding of both engineering and psychology. Rooms were arranged to foster community cohesion while maintaining personal privacy. Ventilation shafts, sometimes over 50 meters deep, were positioned to allow airflow to reach even the lowest levels, demonstrating advanced knowledge of natural ventilation. Wells tapped aquifers, securing water supply without ever exposing residents to danger. The architecture also included complex defensive features, narrow passageways to slow invaders, trapdoors, concealed exits leading to valleys or rivers, and rolling stone doors that could seal off entire sections in moments. Every element reflected careful planning, ingenuity, and an understanding of long-term survival. The question of threats remains tantalizing. While invading armies provide a plausible explanation, the scale and longevity of these cities suggest that danger was perceived as persistent, perhaps even existential. Some researchers propose natural disasters as another reason: floods, solar events, earthquakes, or poison lands. Others, more speculative, suggest cosmic or supernatural threats inspired the underground networks. Whatever the truth, the residents of Cappadocia invested centuries in these constructions, leaving a labyrinthine legacy that still captivates the imagination. Even today, many tunnels and chambers remain unexplored. As archaeologists venture deeper, they encounter levels that feel increasingly alien, less like human settlements and more like something entirely otherworldly. Descending 18 stories below the surface is not just a physical journey. It is a journey into a hidden society that once lived, breathed, and flourished entirely beneath the open sky. Every aspect of daily life was meticulously accounted for. Food was stored in sealed chambers to prevent spoilage. Wine presses and olive oil vats were integrated into the rock. Lighting was provided by oil lamps, with smoke carefully channeled through ventilation shafts to prevent suffocation. Despite the darkness, these subterranean civilizations maintained rhythm, culture, and faith. Religion remained central. Chapels with frescoes, altars, and crosses provided spiritual guidance. Communal gatherings ensured social cohesion. Children were educated. Families conducted their routines with discipline, learning to survive not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually in the absence of sunlight. Even the integration of livestock demonstrates foresight. Sheep, goats, and chickens provided food, heat, and companionship. Placement near surface levels allowed for easier care and adequate ventilation. Yet, they also contributed to the underground ecosystem, supporting the survival of thousands in conditions that might seem unimaginable to a modern mind. The subterranean architects of Cappadocia demonstrated an extraordinary grasp of engineering, sociology, and human psychology. The levels of precision, the consideration for airflow, water, fire safety, and communal balance reflect not ad hoc construction, but centuries of knowledge passed down across generations. These cities were a triumph of human ingenuity, a testament to patience, foresight, and the will to survive against unknown threats. As one descends through the labyrinth of Deranu or Kaklik, the realization becomes undeniable. Life in Cappadocia was not just about hiding from danger. It was about maintaining civilization in the shadows. Education, religion, ritual, and domestic life thrived underground. These cities were living, breathing ecosystems designed to preserve the essence of human culture even in the absence of light and sky. The deeper the explorers go, the more the line between city and world blurs. These are not mere shelters. They are alternative civilizations, a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. It is humbling to consider that while wars, plagues, and empires raged above, entire populations lived, loved, prayed, and worked beneath their notice, invisible to history, yet fully alive. The people of Cappadocia shaped the earth with patience and vision, transforming stone into shelter, survival, and society. They built not with machinery or brute force, but with understanding, cooperation, and determination. For generations, their underground cities have stood as monuments to ingenuity, courage, and the enduring human spirit. Every stone, every tunnel, every chamber reflects a narrative of survival, adaptation, and the unquenchable desire to thrive despite adversity. To this day, the mystery of Cappadocia endures. Who built the first tunnels? What drove them to descend into the earth? Was it invaders, natural disaster, or something altogether stranger? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, did it truly keep them safe? Beneath the surface, in the labyrinth of stone and shadow, the answers remain locked away, waiting for those willing to journey into the darkness and uncover the secrets of a civilization that thrived where the sun never shone. To inhabit the underground of Cappadocia was not merely to hide or flee. It was to live deliberately, with purpose, and with foresight that stretched across generations. These subterranean cities were not isolated pockets of survival. They were components of a grander vision, a sprawling network of human ingenuity carved into volcanic stone over millennia. Beneath the ridges, valleys, and jagged spires of this otherworldly terrain lies a labyrinthine system of tunnels, chambers, and passageways that may interconnect multiple underground cities, suggesting a civilization with long-term planning that stretched far beyond individual settlements. Deranu, Kaklu, Oskak, and several other complexes may not have functioned independently. Rather, they appear as nodes within an extensive subterranean network. Some of the connecting tunnels extend for kilometers, winding beneath the countryside like veins under the skin, often no wider than a man's shoulders. These tunnels were likely used to move people and supplies quietly, to ferry messages, or to provide hidden routes during times of siege. Between Deringuiu and Kakla, two of the largest known underground cities, archaeologists suspect a tunnel nearly 9 kilometers long once connected them. A feat of engineering that speaks not only to technical skill, but to a level of coordination and foresight rarely seen in antiquity. The evidence implies that multiple cities may have operated as a network, supporting each other in crises, forming an underground federation designed for long-term resilience. Beyond practical utility, these passageways were defensive marvels. Narrow corridors, blind turns, and strategic bottlenecks were built to control access, forcing any intruder to advance in single file and become vulnerable to traps or ambushes. Many tunnels were equipped with trapdoors or stone corks, which could be quickly rolled into place to seal passages. Yet, despite decades of excavation, the full scope of these underground systems remains a mystery. New passageways are still being discovered. In 2014, a massive network was uncovered beneath Nevşehir, hinting at a city potentially far larger than Deringu, with multiple floors, aqueducts, chambers for worship, and hundreds of uncharted tunnels. The purpose of these tunnels continues to intrigue historians and archaeologists. Were they merely escape routes, or part of an entire society built to live hidden from the surface? Increasingly, it seems Cappadocia's underground is not just a random collection of dwellings. It is a system meticulously planned, interlinked, and maintained over thousands of years. In some cases, entire cities were buried not by chance or neglect, but intentionally, as if the earth itself were a guardian of secrets too precious or dangerous to be exposed. Despite decades of research, the origins and motivations of Cappadocia's underground architects remain shrouded in mystery. While much of the expansion is tied to the Byzantine period, when Christians sought refuge from invading forces, the earliest levels of many cities predate that era by thousands of years. Some researchers trace the first tunnels to as far back as 4,000 years ago, suggesting that the original builders faced threats that modern history can barely imagine. If that is true, then the driving force behind these subterranean networks was not a passing danger, but a sustained and existential one. Various theories attempt to explain the motivations for such extraordinary undertakings. Some scholars propose environmental threats. Cataclysms such as massive floods, solar events, volcanic winters, or severe climatic changes may have made life on the surface untenable. The cities, self-sufficient and hidden, would have served as long-term survival bunkers, safeguarding communities until the earth above recovered. Others delve into more speculative territory. Ancient astronaut theorists suggest these underground settlements were constructed to hide from beings described as gods, entities who descended from the sky with powers beyond human comprehension. Legends speak of giants wandering the surface, of fire raining from the heavens, and enemies with burning eyes that drove the inhabitants below. While modern ears may dismiss these as myths or exaggerated oral traditions, they indicate fears powerful enough to propel entire civilizations into the rock. In some cultures, descending underground carried symbolic meaning. Digging into the earth was considered a journey into the underworld, a metaphorical death and rebirth, a path of ritual transformation. Perhaps these cities were spiritual sanctuaries as much as physical shelters, spaces designed to sustain life, culture, and faith, while simultaneously serving as instruments of initiation or spiritual practice. Or perhaps some sections were intentionally hidden, forgotten, or sealed to protect secrets that were never meant to be rediscovered. No single explanation captures the entirety of Cappadocia's underground network. Its scale, precision, and age challenge conventional historical frameworks, leaving a haunting uncertainty. Some things buried beneath the earth might extend beyond our capacity to comprehend. Today, the surface of Cappadocia is a dreamscape. Tourists wander valleys carved by wind, past mushroom-shaped spires and fairy chimneys that glow in the sunset. Hot air balloons drift overhead, drifting quietly above the serene, almost alien landscape. Yet beneath their feet lies a realm of darkness and silence, a world carved and refined over thousands of years, waiting patiently, untouched and secret. Visitors who descend into these cities experience only a fragment of their vastness. Narrow staircases wind downward. Low, arched tunnels force one to stoop, reminding explorers of the human scale of their ancient builders. They stand in chambers once filled with the quiet lives of thousands, rooms where families ate, slept, prayed, and waited for danger to pass. Yet, this represents only a fraction of the network. Many corridors remain unexcavated. Some chambers are sealed, others collapse into darkness. Doorways lead to shadowed voids that may connect to chambers yet undiscovered. These are not mere ruins. They are living testimonies to human resilience and foresight. The people of Cappadocia left no names, no written records. Yet in stone, they left their legacy. Every corridor, ventilation shaft, and rolling door speaks of careful planning, engineering skill, and a vision that stretched far beyond the immediate need for survival. They built for centuries of silence, for dangers both known and unknown. Perhaps some sections were designed never to be found, ensuring that their knowledge and lives remained safe from outsiders indefinitely. The construction techniques themselves are awe-inspiring. Rolling stone doors, perfectly balanced and movable from inside, could seal off entire levels instantly. Ventilation shafts, precisely placed, draw fresh air down dozens of meters to the lowest chambers, maintaining breathable air without the aid of modern technology. Water was sourced from deep aquifers, ensuring independence from surface sources, while channels and wells kept supply protected. The layouts also reflect an understanding of social and psychological needs. Living spaces were arranged for family privacy, while communal halls fostered social cohesion. Livestock was housed underground to provide both sustenance and warmth. Kitchens were located to manage smoke efficiently, ensuring air quality throughout the city. Every element reflected foresight, intelligence, and the recognition that life underground could be sustained for decades if needed. Daily life underground was meticulously organized. Families lived in multi-room compartments. Communal areas supported social interaction, and children received education in study rooms carved from stone. Religious practice remained integral. Chapels and churches featured frescoes, crosses, and altars. Oil lamps provided illumination, with smoke guided through ventilation shafts to maintain air quality. Bread baking, wine pressing, and olive oil production continued underground, indicating that even in the absence of sunlight, life retained its rituals, nourishment, and celebration. Cappadocia's underground cities were not merely survival bunkers. They were entirely functional civilizations. They held the rhythm of human life: births, marriages, deaths, education, and worship. While chaos raged above ground, life below continued in disciplined continuity. These were societies that thrived in isolation, hidden from invasions, catastrophes, or perhaps threats lost to history. The planners, architects, and laborers created not just a place to live, but an ecosystem of society, culture, and endurance. Even with modern archaeology, new mysteries continue to emerge. Some tunnels are still sealed, some passages collapse into shadows, and some doorways seem to lead nowhere, as if intentionally designed to confuse or misdirect. The labyrinthine nature of these cities defies simple categorization. They suggest that survival alone was not enough. The builders sought secrecy, permanence, and autonomy. In Cappadocia, the earth was both protector and witness, preserving the ingenuity and courage of generations in silence. The age of these cities is another enigma. While the Byzantine period accounts for significant expansion, the earliest tunnels may date back thousands of years before, suggesting that the initial threat, whatever it was, predated known historical records. Were they hiding from invading empires, environmental catastrophe, or something else entirely? Ancient legends, oral histories, and the symbolic power of subterranean descent hint at fears that are almost incomprehensible today. To enter these cities is to walk among the remnants of a civilization whose understanding of survival, engineering, and society was unmatched. Life underground was not merely survival, it was intentional existence. The people of Cappadocia shaped stone, air, and water with vision and precision. They created sanctuaries, civilizations, and networks designed to endure centuries of danger and silence. And while the surface world flourished and faltered, these underground cities stood as proof of the human capacity for foresight, ingenuity, and endurance. Even today, these tunnels whisper their stories. The rolling stone doors, still perfectly fitted, the air shafts that draw wind from the depths, the miles of hidden corridors, all point to a past in which humans shaped their environment with a purpose that survives in shadow. We may never fully understand the true intent behind Cappadocia's underground cities. Perhaps some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. Yet standing in a chamber carved by ancient hands, beneath tons of stone, one can feel the enduring presence of those who lived, planned, and thrived in darkness. They remind us that survival is not merely about evading danger. It is about shaping one's destiny, preserving culture, and safeguarding knowledge. In Cappadocia, the earth has kept their secret, and it whispers to all who dare to descend. Even beyond the practical and historical, these cities evoke a philosophical reflection on the nature of protection, secrecy, and the human will to endure. They suggest that civilization does not always exist on the surface, that sometimes the most profound truths are buried, hidden from the casual observer, preserved through design and patience. The underground world of Cappadocia endures not only as a monument of engineering, but as a symbol of human resilience and foresight, of societies who chose to endure in darkness rather than perish in light. The cities continue to evoke awe, curiosity, and speculation. Are there still chambers waiting undiscovered? Are the tunnels complete, or is the network far more vast than we imagine? Perhaps the final answers will never emerge. Perhaps some truths are meant to remain beneath our feet, sealed in stone, hidden in shadow. But as visitors wander the surface, hot air balloons drifting over the fairy chimneys, they walk above the remains of one of humanity's most extraordinary achievements, a civilization that lived beneath the earth with patience, purpose, and vision. To the ancients, the dream world held a similar depth of significance. Sleep was not merely a retreat from life, but a doorway into a dimension where the physical and spiritual intersected. Dreams were regarded as messages from gods or spirits, warnings, prophecies, and communications with forces that could shape reality. In this understanding, the dreamer was not passive, but a vessel temporarily aligned with cosmic intelligence. The interpretation of dreams became a profession. Priests, shamans, and oracles spent lifetimes decoding symbols and omens. The patterns of sleep, snakes, suns, or stars seen in dreams were all signs requiring action. Ignoring them could have consequences as real as those of waking life. This belief extended across civilizations, from Mesopotamian river valleys to Egyptian temples, from Greek sanctuaries to the far reaches of Asia. The night offered a channel through which gods, spirits, and unseen forces could reach humanity. In a world where divine intervention was tangible and direct, dreams were both feared and revered. Even today, phrases like "follow your dreams" echo that ancient reverence, hinting at a world in which sleep was not idle rest, but a sacred, powerful interaction with forces beyond understanding. To the ancients, walking through dreams was akin to walking with gods. And in Cappadocia, walking beneath the earth is perhaps no different. The hidden cities are the waking counterpart to those nocturnal journeys, spaces where human ingenuity, courage, and survival instincts meet the silent whispers of history, mystery, and the unknown. The people of Cappadocia looked downward, into darkness, and chose life. And in doing so, they left behind a legacy that challenges, fascinates, and inspires, standing as a reminder that sometimes the most profound truths are deliberately hidden, waiting for those brave enough to seek them. The The first civilization to systematically record and interpret dreams were the Sumerians, who flourished in Mesopotamia over 5 millennia ago. For these early peoples, dreams were far from random or meaningless. They were considered vital communications from the divine, intricately symbolic and capable of influencing the course of both individual lives and entire societies. Among the crumbling ruins of cities such as Uruk, and Lagash, archaeologists discovered clay tablets inscribed with dreams, some personal, others political, all treated with reverence. Dream interpretation in Sumer was not a casual pastime. It was a structured practice, taught by experienced priests and scholars, and held in the highest esteem. Kings maintained court interpreters, specialists trained in reading the omens embedded in dreams. Their interpretations were not merely advisory. They could shape military strategy, urban policy, or even the fate of empires. One of the most renowned examples of this dream-centered worldview appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known literary masterpieces. Gilgamesh, alongside his companion Enkidu, experiences vivid, symbolic dreams prior to embarking on perilous quests, such as their mission to confront the monster Humbaba. In these dreams, celestial battles unfold, mountains collapse, and ominous figures appear. Priests and maternal figures interpreted these visions as divine guidance, providing both warnings and prophecies. Ignoring such dreams was unthinkable, for they were believed to be the voice of the gods themselves. The Sumerians distinguished between two types of dreams: those sent by the gods, intended to instruct or aid, and those considered meaningless, mere echoes of the day's events or the stirrings of the body. Differentiating between these required exceptional skill, a deep understanding of divine symbolism, and years of study. Temples often featured chambers specifically designed for ritual sleep, where priests or kings would enter a meditative state in hopes of receiving divine visions. This practice, later known in various cultures as incubation, likely originated with the Sumerians, whose sacred dreams were regarded as oracular, sometimes more authoritative than signs observed in waking life. Dreams also wielded political power. A king claiming to have received divine instruction in a dream could legitimize his rule or justify decisive, even drastic, actions. "The gods told me in a dream" was not merely spiritual rhetoric. It was a declaration of authority. The Sumerians believed the universe pulsed with meaning, and dreams were its language. Every image, from a storm to a lion to a falling star, carried cosmic significance. In a world where gods walked alongside mortals, to dream was to listen, and to disregard those visions was to risk the wrath of heaven itself. Turning to the Nile, the ancient Egyptians held dreams in similar reverence, but with their own unique understanding. In Egyptian culture, dreams were portals, connecting the mortal world with the divine, glimpses into the afterlife, and sometimes instructions for daily conduct. Sleep was not merely rest. It was a rehearsal for eternity, an opportunity for the soul to engage with forces beyond human perception. Dreams were both deeply personal and broadly prophetic, often shaping the actions of pharaohs, priests, and ordinary citizens alike. The Egyptians, like the Sumerians, classified dreams into two categories: truthful dreams, believed to be sent by gods or spirits for guidance, healing, or warning, and false dreams, seen as misleading or arising from imbalance in the body. Temples dedicated to deities such as Serapis, Thoth, and Ammonius incorporated dream incubation into their sacred rituals. Worshippers would sleep within temple walls, seeking visions that were recorded, interpreted, and sometimes inscribed onto stone or papyrus. Occasionally, these dreams provided not only guidance but actual healing, reinforcing the Egyptians' belief in the tangible power of the dream world. One of the most remarkable artifacts reflecting this culture is the Ramses Dream Book, dating to approximately 1300 BCE. This papyrus scroll functions as a comprehensive catalog of dream symbols and their meanings, listing over 100 dream scenarios alongside their interpretations. If a man dreamt of eating crocodile flesh, it signified that he would triumph over his enemies. Drinking warm beer indicated forthcoming sorrow. Such interpretations were treated with utmost seriousness. Pharaohs, generals, and priests alike consulted dream interpreters, who served as intermediaries between human and divine will. In Egyptian thought, dreams were intimately tied to the concept of the Ka, the vital essence or soul. During sleep, the Ka was believed to leave the body, journeying through other realms and returning with messages. These could be visits from deceased loved ones or audiences with gods delivering guidance or warnings. Sometimes, however, dreams carried malevolent forces, prompting the recitation of protective spells to safeguard the sleeper. Even tomb inscriptions speak of dreams, recounting how gods visited kings at night to provide divine sanction or to ensure a lasting legacy. For Egyptians, dreams were not illusory. They were portals into eternity. Across the Mediterranean, in ancient Greece, dreams occupied a similarly elevated status, merging medicine, philosophy, and mythology. Dreams were not merely personal reflections, but channels through which the divine could communicate cosmic messages. Greek thought also initiated early inquiries into the nature of dreams, planting the seeds for psychological exploration. The primary sites for dream revelation in Greece were the Asclepian temples, dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. Pilgrims arrived from across the Mediterranean, seeking the god's intervention through a process known as incubation. Before sleeping, they engaged in rituals of cleansing, fasting, prayer, and offerings, preparing their bodies and spirits to receive divine guidance. Within these sacred spaces, it was said that Asclepius himself would appear in dreams, diagnosing illness or prescribing remedies. Temple priests, called therapeuti, interpreted these dreams, applying treatments based on the visions received. These practices seamlessly combined mysticism with medicine, producing results that were respected and, in some cases, perceived as miraculous. Walls were often inscribed with messages of gratitude, recording the healing experiences of visitors who believed they had been touched by divine power. Yet dreams in Greece extended beyond healing. They were prophetic, political, and instrumental in shaping decisions of state and battle. Homeric epics frequently illustrate the divine manipulation of dreams. Zeus sends a deceptive vision to Agamemnon in the Iliad to influence the outcome of war, while in the Odyssey, Penelope speaks of two gates of dreams, one of horn, yielding truthful visions, and one of ivory, from which deception emerges. Philosophers like Aristotle and Heraclitus debated the origin and nature of dreams, questioning whether they were divine messages or natural phenomena of the soul. Meanwhile, Artemidorus of Daldis, a 2nd century CE interpreter, compiled the Onira Critica, a 5-volume manual that classified dreams according to profession, gender, status, and symbolic content, a guide that influenced dream interpretation for centuries. The Greeks held that during sleep, the soul partially detached from the body, entering a liminal state where it could perceive truths inaccessible in waking life. Dreams, whether divine or internal, were never considered trivial. They were moments of revelation, glimpses of the eternal, opportunities to touch the divine. Prophecy and foresight were central to the dream experience in all ancient civilizations. Dreams were often believed to transcend linear time, allowing glimpses of the future to bleed into the present. The knowledge gained from dreams carried immense power, and with it, responsibility. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, rulers, generals, and prophets relied on their nocturnal visions to guide decisions, aware that a misinterpreted dream could lead to catastrophe, while a correct reading could alter the course of history. In Mesopotamia, dreams depicting celestial phenomena, falling stars, or blood-red rivers were interpreted as warnings of war or disaster. Priests meticulously recorded these dreams, searching for patterns capable of predicting the fate of cities or empires. In Egypt, the pharaoh Thutmose IV famously claimed that a dream revealed his destiny. The Sphinx spoke to him, promising kingship if he cleared the sands surrounding it. Whether fact or propaganda, the dream secured his authority, demonstrating the intertwining of divine vision and political legitimacy. In the Greek world, dreams had tangible effects on both personal and political realms. Leaders sought guidance through incubation or consultation with oracles, such as those at Delphi, whose practitioners frequently interpreted visions obtained during ritual sleep. Even Alexander the Great reportedly received a dream from the Egyptian god Serapis, interpreting it as divine favor before his conquest of Persia. Dreams were not exclusive to rulers. Ordinary individuals also looked to dreams to foretell marriage, childbirth, illness, or death. Artemidorus Oneirocritica contains thousands of such interpretations, including common motifs such as losing teeth, encountering death, taking flight, or sudden changes in fortune. Dreams provided ordinary people with access to the divine, a fleeting glimpse into the hidden threads of destiny, but also a source of anxiety. Misreading a vision could be disastrous. In a world governed by divine whispers, sleep was never private. It was a conversation with fate itself. Healing, too, was often mediated through dreams. Sacred sanctuaries devoted to nocturnal revelation, known across civilizations as dream temples, provided spaces where the ill could seek divine intervention. Treatments were guided by visions, whether the temple was in Mesopotamia, Egypt, or Greece. Herbs and potions complemented the instructions gleaned from dreams, merging tangible remedies with spiritual insight. Across these ancient societies, dreams were inseparable from the sacred, political, and personal dimensions of life. They were a bridge between worlds, a key to understanding divine will, and a mechanism for shaping both private destinies and public history. In a time before scientific explanations, dreams were taken seriously, recorded diligently, and acted upon with reverence and care. To sleep was not merely to rest. It was to step into a realm where the mortal and the divine met, where guidance, warning, and prophecy converged into nightly visions. Across the ancient world, when illness, misfortune, or inexplicable suffering struck, people did not first reach for herbs, potions, or physical remedies. Instead, they turned to sleep. Sleep, for them, was not merely a pause from life's trials, but a gateway, a sacred portal through which the divine could intervene. They sought guidance and healing from forces unseen, trusting that in slumber the gods themselves might appear to provide remedies beyond human comprehension. Among the most renowned practitioners of this belief were the Asclepians in ancient Greece, temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. These temples were centers of ritual and wonder, drawing pilgrims from across the Mediterranean. Yet the Greeks were not alone in this practice. Long before their era, civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia held similar convictions. To them, dreams were not idle wanderings of the mind. They were vehicles of spiritual and physical restoration. Temples were not sanctuaries merely to escape illness or misfortune. They were spaces where one could encounter the very source of healing, often through the act of dreaming. The central ritual facilitating this interaction was called incubation. It was both precise and profound. A pilgrim would purify the body, engaging in fasting, ritual bathing, and sometimes offering sacrifices. The physical preparation was only one part of the process. The mind, too, had to be open, attuned, and ready to receive the messages that might arrive in the night. When the seeker finally laid down within the sacred chamber, usually under the cloak of darkness, the goal was simple yet profound: to dream with intention, to open oneself fully to divine contact. Within these dreams, the divine could manifest in innumerable forms. Some pilgrims saw serpents coiled around their bodies, sacred symbols of Asclepius, representing healing and transformation. Others experienced visions of radiant light bathing their bodies or hands, ethereal, benevolent, touching them with restorative energy. The moment they awoke, temple priests, who were also trained interpreters of dreams, would listen attentively, translate the images, and prescribe actions based on the visions. Healing might take the form of a medicinal brew, a specific path to walk, a ritual to perform, or an offering of thanks. Sometimes the dream itself was deemed curative, the divine act occurring entirely within the mind and spirit, but producing tangible benefit. These practices were by no means marginal. Thousands flocked to these temples. Inscriptions etched into the walls recount miraculous recoveries, blindness cured, fevers abated, unrelenting pain alleviated. Whether these outcomes were physical, psychosomatic, or spiritual, the ancients regarded the dream as a powerful and legitimate instrument of healing. The power of dream healing transcended borders. In Egypt, pilgrims sought the temples of Serapis or Imhotep, entering sacred chambers to receive nocturnal guidance. In Mesopotamia, devotees visited the temples of Gula, goddess of medicine, to undergo similar experiences of incubation and ritual sleep. Across these civilizations, a common belief unified them. The body and soul were inseparable, and the soul spoke most clearly in dreams. Healing, therefore, was not a matter solely of curing the flesh. It was the restoration of harmony between the human and the divine. In the silence of these sanctuaries, dreams were not considered fantastical stories. They were medicine, a sacred and necessary intervention. But the significance of dreams did not end with healing. In many cultures, the nocturnal realm offered one of the few moments when the living might communicate with the dead. Dreams created a liminal space, a fragile veil that temporarily thinned between the world of the living and the realm of spirits. Seeing a deceased loved one in a dream was never interpreted as a mere memory or emotional projection. Instead, it was believed that the spirit had truly returned, bearing messages, warnings, or unfinished requests. Such encounters were deeply consequential, charged with emotion, and often regarded as sacred. In Egypt, where beliefs about the afterlife were paramount, dreams were thought to establish a direct link with the underworld. The Ka, the vital essence of a person, was believed to leave the body during sleep, traversing the realms of the living and the dead. When a deceased ancestor appeared in a dream, it might indicate displeasure, a need for offerings, or guidance intended for the living. Egyptians sometimes inscribed letters to the dead, placed within tombs or shrines, asking for protection or aid, hoping that a response would come through a dream. In Mesopotamia, dream encounters with the departed were treated with equal reverence. The dead retained authority and influence even in the afterlife, and dreams were considered portals through which they could communicate with the living. A vision of the deceased could signify neglected rituals or unfulfilled vows, prompting corrective ceremonies, offerings, or purification to restore balance. The Greeks, too, took the presence of the dead in dreams seriously. Homeric epics such as the Odyssey describe encounters with the spirits of the fallen, illustrating a belief that sleep offered an opportunity to traverse realms normally inaccessible. The philosopher Heraclitus captured this insight, stating, "The waking have one world in common, but the sleeping turn aside each into a world of his own." It was within this private, liminal world that the dead could speak, advise, and influence the living. Even beyond the civilizations of Europe and the Middle East, similar beliefs prevailed. Across cultures, dreams were seen as moments when the departed could reach across the veil, a channel through which the living might receive guidance, warning, or reassurance. The voice of a lost parent or child, speaking in the darkness of night, was real, tangible, and respected. Sleep was not an escape from life. It was a realm where the past persisted and could still exert influence on the present. Dreams themselves were rarely straightforward. They were filled with symbolism, strange creatures, impossible events, and celestial signs. They were thought to carry coded language from the divine, a sophisticated semiotic system that required careful study to understand. Professional interpreters, operating like priests or shamans, dedicated themselves to this task. They learned vast catalogs of dream imagery, memorized symbolic associations, and developed a refined ability to distinguish meaningful visions from the meaningless echoes of the mind. Their interpretations could affect political decisions, medical treatment, and even military strategy. Certain symbols recurred across cultures, though never with fixed meaning. A snake could signify danger in one context, transformation in another. Fire might warn of destruction, signal purification, or indicate energy and vitality. Flying could represent liberation of the soul or a desire to escape life's burdens. The Egyptians maintained comprehensive dream manuals, recording hundreds of symbols and their interpretations. Drowning could foretell emotional turmoil. Blindness might indicate spiritual insight or unrecognized truths. These manuals were more than superstition. They were codified systems of knowledge refined over generations. In Greece, Artemidorus of Daldis composed the Onira Critica, a 5-volume treatise on dream interpretation. He emphasized that context mattered profoundly. The same dream could carry vastly different meanings depending on the dreamer's profession, social status, and personal experience. A farmer dreaming of floodwaters might face imminent disaster for his crops, whereas a sailor's identical vision could signal changes at sea. This nuanced approach represents one of the earliest recognitions that personal circumstances shape the significance of dreams, a remarkably modern insight for the 2nd century CE. Dream interpretation was closely intertwined with other forms of divination. Dreams were considered one strand in a complex web of omens, signs, and sacred messages. Dreamers might also consult oracles, cast lots, or perform ritual offerings to clarify the meaning of visions. Some maintained dream journals, inscribed on papyrus or clay, not merely for personal reflection, but for communal guidance. Dreams, in this sense, were a language, a system of coded communication from forces beyond human comprehension. Understanding them was akin to deciphering the will of the gods, the workings of fate, and the hidden patterns of the soul. To the ancients, dreams were not idle stories. They were messages in code, sent from the cosmos, often carrying warnings, guidance, or revelation. Modern society tends to dismiss dreams as fleeting fragments, quickly forgotten or fodder for psychological analysis. Yet the ancients recognized their profound significance. Dreams were structured, respected, and actively studied. They guided decisions, facilitated healing, connected the living with the dead, and offered glimpses into the divine. They were woven into the very fabric of life. Medicine, religion, politics, and personal conduct all intersected with the dream world. With the rise of scientific rationalism in the post-Enlightenment West, dreams were reinterpreted. They were no longer divine messages, but products of neurological activity, chemical reactions, memory processing, or random neural firing. The sacred was reduced to clinical observation, the symbolic to physiology. Yet even today, in moments of grief, uncertainty, or profound insight, dreams continue to matter. A vision of a departed loved one can bring closure. Recurring nightmares can signal hidden anxieties. Dreams can illuminate truths obscured by waking life. Freud and Jung attempted to reclaim some of the ancient reverence for dreams, recognizing their symbolic and emotional power, even if stripped of divinity. What the ancients understood is that dreams are inseparable from life. They mirror our fears, desires, and experiences, yet they also connect us to something greater. Whether delivering messages from unseen gods, warning of unseen dangers, or allowing communion with ancestors, dreams offered access to a dimension of existence unavailable to waking consciousness. In sleep, humanity conversed with the unknown. Perhaps the true loss of modernity is not just the decline of belief in divine dreams, but the humility to listen, to acknowledge that the night may hold wisdom beyond our immediate comprehension. Across time and culture, one idea remains constant. Dreams are not random occurrences. They are thresholds, doors to realms of understanding, insight, and connection. The question has never been whether dreams exist. It is whether we are willing to step through them. Every temple, every tablet, every inscription from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece carries the same quiet admonition: pay attention. Sleep not to forget the world, but to perceive it more deeply. In the profound stillness of night, when the clamor of daily life subsides, the ancients believed one could hear what the waking mind often misses. That dreams are not mere shadows of thought. They are the language of the soul, the whisper of forces unseen, the bridge between mortality and eternity.